I arrived 5 minutes early like I always do. The parking lot was already full, guests floating inside in shades of cream and silver. I took a slow breath and stepped out of the car, one hand clutching the small velvet box with the wedding rings inside. Logan's request, not mine. He said it'd mean something having them passed down. I was halfway to the chapel doors when I saw him. Logan stood outside stiff in his tailored suit, hands wringing. Avery stood beside him, perfect posture, mouth tight. Her eyes met mine and didn't move. He walked toward me quickly, blocking the entrance. "Mom," he said, voice low and urgent, "look, this isn't the right time." My stomach tightened. I brought the rings. "You forgot them." He took the box without touching my hand. "Avery's. She's just really stressed. She asked that today be simple, peaceful. And maybe it's better if you're asking me to leave," I said. It wasn't a question. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Please, just don't make this harder than it already is." I looked past him just once. I could see the entryway, the flowers, a flicker of candlelight. No one else seemed to notice us standing there. I nodded. "Have a beautiful day." Then I turned and walked back to the car. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in the car. Not on the winding road back to the estate. I drove with both hands steady on the wheel. The sky was overcast, and the orchard trees leaned in the wind like they always do in late spring. At home, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and hung my coat on the same hook as always. The house didn't ask questions. The floorboards didn't care what I wore. I made tea, set one cup, sat down. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't need to. My silence was loud enough. The next morning, just after 9, the phone rang. The phone rang once, twice. I let it go to the third before answering. Mom Logan's voice, still cautious but lighter than yesterday. "Hey, so listen, the photographer wants to do some portraits this afternoon. Me and Avery were thinking the orchard would be perfect, you know, the light, the trees, it'd mean a lot." I glanced at the key ring beside my tea mug, the same old brass set with a worn tag that still had my father's handwriting. "You want the orchard," I said. "Just for the pictures. Avery loves the wildflower rose near the fence line, and we figured we could grab a few inside the house too. Just a few shots, it'd be quick." I stood, walking to the window. The orchard looked the same as ever. Nothing new what had happened yesterday. The petals didn't curl in shame. I kept my voice level. "Ask your wife." There was silence on the line. "Not long. Just long enough." All right," he said. "We just thought, okay, I'll let her know." He hung up first. I placed the phone back in its cradle and returned to my tea. The cup had gone cold, but I didn't warm it again. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to scatter the first pale blossoms across the porch. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I wandered through the house. The old study, the back hallway, the empty guest room they once lived in. At midnight, I opened my laptop. I don't check social media often, but curiosity pulled me. Avery had posted a filtered photo, her in white Logan behind her son, flaring through the orchard trees. Caption, "Perfect start. Perfect place. Perfect family. No disruptions." There was no mention of me. No trace I had ever been part of the day. The ring box, the history, the land beneath their feet. Gone like I had never existed. I closed the laptop, and in the quiet, I reached up and touched the keyring on its hook, then took it down and clipped it back to my chain. In the morning, I heard gravel crunching. 2 sets of footsteps approached the front door. They didn't knock, just let themselves up onto the porch like it was still theirs. I opened the door before they reached it. "Morning," Mom Logan said, with a brightness that didn't reach his eyes. Avery stood beside him, holding a manila folder, lips drawn in that familiar, tight line she mistook for a smile. "We thought we'd come by with something exciting," she said. I stepped aside. "Let them in." Logan brushed the dust off his shoes like he was entering a stranger's house. They sat at the kitchen table like guests. I stayed standing. So, Avery began flipping open the folder we've been thinking. The orchard, the house. This whole place, it has incredible potential. Logan added, with the wedding, and all people kept asking if we'd rent it out. For photos, receptions, even weekend retreats. Avery leaned in. It could be the perfect venue. Rustic, elegant, marketable. With a little investment, we could modernize the barn ad, outdoor lighting, redo the guest wing. I waited. She smiled again. Of course it wouldn't be just for others. We'd stay here too, oversee things. Logan nodded. It'd be good for all of us. And me? I asked. They hesitated. Avery cleared her throat. Well, obviously you'd be welcome. But maybe. This is an opportunity to transition. You've said yourself the winters are getting harder. Logan reached for my hand. I didn't give it. Where exactly would I go? I asked. They exchanged a glance. Not surprised, just rehearsed. There are lovely retirement cottages near Ashgrove, Avery said. We looked into a few. You'd have your own space. Community care, no pressure. I looked out the window. The row of pear trees needed pruning. The hydrangeas were late to bloom. You've been busy, I said. Avery smiled again, falsely certain she had won something. Logan didn't meet my eyes. Let me think about it, I said. They left the folder on the table, bold print across the top. Holt Estate Development Proposal. When they drove away, I didn't pick it up. Instead, I walked to the back hallway and opened the door to my husband's old study. The study still smelled faintly of old books and ink, even after all these years. I hadn't stepped inside in months, maybe longer. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew something was wrong. The desk chair was angled slightly outward. The cabinet door under the window was ajar. And the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, one my husband always kept firmly shut, was pulled out just enough to be noticeable. I crouched and slid it open. Folders leaned at uneven angles. The survey maps of the orchard were usually stacked tightly, labeled by decade. Now the top one, the updated boundary line after the North Field purchase, was gone. I sifted through the rest, my fingers brushing empty space where it should have been. On the desk, an old binder lay open. Pages shifted as if someone had flipped through them in a hurry. Contracts, tax assessments, equipment receipts. Nothing dramatic. But someone had been looking for something. I checked the small compartment my father once carved beneath the bottom shelf. I'd forgotten it existed until the bare edge caught the light. I slid my hand inside. My fingers brushed a paper envelope, thin, brittle, sealed. My father's handwriting covered the front. For Marin. Only if needed. I sat in my husband's old chair and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a notarized clause he'd added years ago, reinforcing that I alone held administrative control over the estate until my death, or by my written decision. No shared authority. No circumvention. The date at the bottom startled me. He'd filed it quietly after Logan's first year of college. Before Avery. Before any of this. I folded the documents back into their envelope and went straight to my bedroom. From the top shelf of the closet, I retrieved a metal box, the one that held birth certificates and our marriage license. I added the new envelope to it, along with the deed and the original estate papers, then locked it with a key I kept on my own chain. I left the study lights off when I closed the door. The house felt different now, not threatened, just awake. And early the next morning, as sunlight touched the orchard, I heard footsteps coming up the porch again. Avery called the next afternoon with a breezy tone, as if everything between us had always been simple. I thought we could catch up, she said. Just us girls. She suggested a cafe in town, the kind with hanging lights and tiny portions. I said yes. Sometimes it's best to let people believe they're steering. She was already seated when I arrived, waving like an old friend. You look great, she said, though her eyes were already scanning the menu. We ordered something with lentils on her side, soup on mine. She skipped the small talk. Logan and I have been thinking about how to make this work for everyone. She began folding her hands neatly on the table. We know this place means a lot to you. I nodded once. But we also see what it could become. Your orchard has charm, authenticity. With the right upgrades, it could host everything from corporate retreats to destination weddings. And you wouldn't have to handle any of it. You've earned rest. She smiled, like she was offering a gift. I'm not tired, I said. She blinked. Of course. But eventually, transitions have to happen. And Logan, he wants to honor the legacy. You could move to a smaller place in town. Still close. Still involved. I'm already involved. The food came. She barely touched hers. After a few more rehearsed lines about expansion branding guest cottages, she paused and tilted her head. We just want to take something beautiful and make it sustainable. I folded my napkin. It already is. She exhaled, the edge showing for the first time. Marin, we're not trying to push you, but this place can't stay locked in time. I smiled then. Not out of warmth, but because I finally saw it clearly. Thank you for dinner. I stood and paid the check before she could reach for it. As I stepped outside, the air felt cooler. Cleaner, somehow. She didn't follow. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the orchard path in silence until the stars came out. In the morning, there was a knock, and this time, they didn't come alone. They arrived just after 9, 3 figures walking up the path with the stiff politeness of people who wanted something but didn't plan to ask nicely. Logan looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept, while Avery held a leather portfolio against her chest. The 2 men behind them wore suits too formal for a country morning. I stepped onto the porch before they spoke. Mom Logan began, "We need to talk about the estate." Avery took over. "We brought some professionals to help clarify things." Her smile never reached her eyes. One of the lawyers opened a folder. "Ms. Holt, based on what we've reviewed, the property is at financial risk. Maintenance costs, lack of revenue, depreciation, your son is concerned." "Concerned?" I repeated. Logan stepped forward. "Mom, you live out here alone. It's too much for you to manage. And Avery and I, we want to build a future. The orchard could provide security." Avery added, "You've dedicated your whole life to this place. Maybe it's time to enjoy something easier." The lawyer slid a stack of documents across the porch railing. "A cooperative transition is best, but if needed, Mr. Holt can petition the court for division of property. A forced sale would allow both parties to benefit." I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I walked inside without a word. When I returned, I held a single envelope. I opened it slowly and unfolded the notarized deed, placing it on the railing beside their stack. My name sat alone on the line for administrative authority, my father's signature just beneath. "This is the only document that matters," I said. The younger lawyer frowned. "That clause can be challenged." "Then challenge it," I replied. Avery's mask slipped for a moment, irritation flashing through. "We're trying to compromise." "No," I said. "You're trying to take." Logan's face tightened, anger, mixing with something that might have been shame. The lawyers gathered their folders, signaling the conversation was over, at least for the moment. I walked them to the gate. As they stepped through, I closed it behind them and slid the bolt into place. They drove off in silence, but I knew this wasn't finished. And that evening, as the sun dipped behind the orchard, a familiar car turned into the drive alone this time. 2 days later, I got a call from Henry, our old family lawyer. He was retired now, mostly gardening and taking care of his cat, but still sharp as a tack. He said he'd been going through his archive boxes and found something, one of those just-in-case things my father used to leave behind, like breadcrumbs. I drove into town the next morning. The folder was already waiting on his desk when I arrived. Inside, a sealed envelope, same handwriting, older paper. He gave a small shrug. "Your father asked me to hold on to it. Said it should only reach you if someone ever came sniffing around with lawyers and smiles." I nodded and opened it there in front of him. It wasn't long. Just a letter. A few lines written in his steady hand. Maren, if you're reading this, it means someone is trying to talk you out of what you've earned. You owe no surrender to those who don't see the worth in what you've built or who pretend to love it only when it benefits them. Protect it. Protect yourself. No legal jargon. Just truth. Henry gave me a quiet look. You know what to do. That afternoon, I updated my will. I listed the property, the land boundaries, and every clause of protection I'd been too hesitant to assert before. I added language my father never used, but I finally understood exclusive inheritance conditions. No transfer without consent, no guardianship, no loopholes. Then I called my doctor, booked a full checkup, and asked for a copy of every recent result. Control isn't about power. It's about preparation. And peace. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the wind move through the trees like a tide. The orchard was still mine, not because of ink or stamps, but because I was finally willing to hold it without apology. The next day, just before noon, I heard tires again. Gravel cracking under pressure. Only one car this time. And only one person stepped out, Avery. Clipboard in hand. Alone. She didn't smile this time. Avery stood by the gate with a clipboard tucked against her chest like a badge. Her heels crunched against the gravel as she stepped forward, her tone brisk and purposeful. I wanted to speak without distractions, she said. This is moving forward, Maren. With or without your cooperation. I didn't reply. I let the silence stretch. She tapped the clipboard. We've already spoken to a contractor. The venue conversion would start with the barn, expand the driveway, replace the fencing, reroute the irrigation. The house would be next. Logan and I will live on site at least part-time. She paused, as if expecting resistance. When I gave none, she pressed on. You can choose how involved you want to be. Stay here or relocate comfortably. We've found another community near Lakeview. All expenses covered. Her voice softened, almost convincing. We're offering you freedom. I let her speak. Every word was a window. I know this place means a lot to you, she continued. But sometimes we have to let go of what was to make room for what could be. You holding on isn't helping anyone. Still, I said nothing. She glanced around the orchard like she already owned it. You're not the only one with a vision anymore. I stepped forward, then not rushed, not angry, just steady. I reached for the gate and opened it wide. Avery tilted her head, uncertain. I think we're done here, I said. Maren. I closed the gate behind her. Quiet. Firm. There was no argument, no yelling. That would have given her ground to stand on. All I gave her was the truth of where she stood and where she no longer belonged. She lingered on the other side for a beat, lips parted like she had more to say. Then she turned and walked back to her car. From the porch, I watched her drive away, the dust rising behind her like smoke. The orchard exhaled. That night, I slept with the windows open, and a week later, Logan came back, this time with no suit, no clipboard, and no ring on his finger. It had been nearly 4 weeks since I closed the gate behind Avery. The days passed quietly, pruning, mending, walking the orchard at dusk. No calls, no more cars up the drive, just birdsong and the rhythm of trees, remembering they belonged to no one. Then one evening, I saw him. Logan stepped out of his car like the air had gotten too heavy to breathe. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes shadowed, hair unkempt, like he hadn't cared in days. He didn't have a folder, no papers. No voice rehearsed for persuasion. He just stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, not meeting my eyes. I opened the door without a word. He followed me in, pausing in the doorway of the kitchen, like it was a place he hadn't earned back yet. I pulled out a chair and sat. He took the one across from me slowly, carefully, like he didn't know if it would hold. She left, he said after a long pause. I waited. She said I wasn't ambitious anymore, that I'd let something small ruin everything. Still, I said nothing. He looked down at his hands. I pushed you away. I let her talk for me, decide for me. I knew it was wrong, but I thought, maybe she saw something I couldn't. Maybe this place really did need change. He finally looked up, but it didn't. I just needed to grow up. I nodded once, then stood to fill the kettle. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore, just worn around the edges like a path that hadn't been walked in a while but hadn't vanished. I set 2 mugs on the table. Coffee, no sugar, just like before. He took it with both hands like it might fall otherwise. We didn't talk much after that. He sat with his back to the window watching the orchard fade into dusk. I watched him. Some people don't need to be forgiven out loud. They just need to be allowed to return. And the next morning, before he spoke another word, he followed me out to the garden with work gloves on. Logan didn't move back into the house. Not right away. He took the spare room in the old tool shed, cleaned it out, made it livable. Said it felt honest starting small. Each morning, I'd find him already in the field hauling branches, checking soil, trimming vines without needing direction. He didn't ask for praise, and I didn't offer any. But I made extra coffee, left it on the porch without a word. Weeks passed like that. Quiet, steady. One evening after we finished stacking firewood, he sat beside me under the elm tree. The sun was low, spilling light over the orchard, like it knew every story the ground held. He cleared his throat. Will the keys ever be mine? I didn't answer right away. I reached up and touched the thin silver chain around my neck, the one I'd worn every day since my father passed. The old brass key rested beneath my collarbone, cool and familiar. When you're ready to carry what they mean, I said, not just own what they unlock. He nodded. No protest, no defense, just the understanding that some doors don't open with metal alone. The next morning, he met me at the southern row with gloves already on. I handed him the pruners. Didn't say a word. He didn't need instruction anymore. We walked the rows together the same way my father once walked them with me. He asked about the root systems, the grafting methods, the early bloom signs. I answered where needed, but mostly let the land teach him. It has a way of revealing what people are made of. Later that night, I slipped the chain off my neck and placed it on the bedside table. Just for a moment, I held the key in my palm and closed my hand around it. It felt lighter than it used to. Not because it mattered less, but because I wasn't holding it alone anymore.